And good morning, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. You are listening to BoqueteNOW Talk Radio on Radio Cherokee 103.3 FM, sponsored by Big Daddy's Grill, Boulder 54 in the Tap Out Sport Zone. We've got a very good show, great show planned for you today. I have with me in the outdoor studio USMC retired First Sergeant Daniel Gallagher, and he's a specialist in PTSD and suicide prevention. He's formerly a psychologist, and we're gonna be talking about several things today of great interest. And from what I understand from our wonderfully outstanding and superlative engineer, Bolivar, the video is working, so if we're recording the show, I will post it on the interwebs and on my BoqueteNOW YouTube channel probably Sunday. But before we begin with Dan, I just want to go over a thing or two from the communication number 338, which was posted last night, January 28th. The Ministry of Health has measured from day one the behavior of COVID-19 both globally and locally. Therefore, within the strategies and actions of the health system is to combat the pandemic by reinforcing the installed capacity and thus provide timely, safe, and effective care to positive patients in Panama. The delivery of 3 projects is expected, which together increases to 204 the number of beds for COVID-19 care throughout the country. The first of them is located in the community of San Mateo, in David, in the province of Chiriquí, where a place is set up which will be destined for the care of patients, moderate people suffering moderately from COVID-19, but are in stable condition, but need to be monitored by a team 24 hours a day. That project is 85% complete. Also one in the Venegas Health region, and also in, where's the other one here? Well, I think it's Fabrega. At Fabrega Hospital, which might also be in Venegas. I think I only have 2 of those, so sorry about that. These projects are about 98% complete, and another one that is going to be delivered soon will be by the Specialized Higher Technical Institute, and that also is 98% complete. Regarding the epidemiological report, in the world, there are 55,863,355 people that have recovered so far from COVID-19. That's out of 100.1 million accumulated positive cases. That puts the fatality rate worldwide at 2.16%. Here in Panama, as of last night, Thursday, January 28th, 269,637 people have recovered. There were 1,408 new positive cases. That makes a total of cases of 316,808. There were 11,030 tests done. The positivity rate has dropped to 12.7%, which is very good. And our fatality rate is 1.6%, which is significantly lower than what the world has to offer. There are still 41,000 active cases. The 39,000 are recovering at home, and 483 are in hotels. It's 243 in the ICU. And as usual, all official information regarding the pandemic in Panama and the actions of the national government are communicated through official MINSA accounts on the main social networks at minsa.gov.pa, which is why when I post the numbers from TVN2, I also follow that up by posting the same information directly from the MINSA website, so you can be sure that you are getting accurate information that has been vetted and approved by the Panamanian government. Anyway, excuse me, and that's our news for today. Let's get on with Dan. How you doing, Dan?
Good, very good.
I'm glad to have you back on the show. Dan's been on the show. It's like fourth time, I think.
I believe so.
Yeah. You know, even under normal circumstances, when there isn't a worldwide pandemic and there aren't all the mental problems that come with being quarantined and whatnot, PTSD and the suicide rate is something to be taken very seriously.
Absolutely.
But now, when you have the combination of the problems, especially with vets, but everybody in general, really, and you add on to that the concerns about a pandemic and and the effects of being locked down and everything, does have an increase on mental health problems, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Depression will increase, just increases because you change your pattern of behavior. If you isolate as part of your pattern behavior, you do become more and more depressed. Every human being alive has ways they cope when they're not feeling well mentally. Go for a walk, go for a lunch or supper, go see friends.
Yeah.
Now we have the pandemic, so if you have a moderate or less case of depression, all of a sudden that increases. You get a sense of foreboding. I don't know any other way to say it, that things aren't like they were. And then you get this sense that things will never be back to normal.
Yeah.
And that becomes a serious issue with people who already have been diagnosed with depression, but also people who haven't been and have been on the edge of it and now have it.
Yeah. And you know, what I believe compounds that problem is there's still... And there has been a lot done to alleviate this, but there's still a certain amount of shame associated with mental health. And you know, you and I both know, we've talked about this a lot, that there are people who are experiencing genuine symptoms of depression, but they're too embarrassed to go see a doctor. They don't want to talk to their friends about it because of this sense of, you know, you're somehow less of a human being, or you're somehow, you know, broken. And especially for men,
right.
You know, women, I think, you know, can freely discuss these things amongst themselves, which I think is fantastic.
Right.
But you know, us guys, you know, we tend to want the world to see us as strong, and that's a sign of weakness, which it's not really, but that's perceived that way. Is that correct?
It's correct. Actually, physical injuries, people commiserate with you, sorry if I got that wrong, and say how sad they are, cancer, any form. When it's mental health, there's a stigma. It has been forever. When you talk about veterans, there is a true stigma to any mental health issues. The Veterans Administration has done some work with it. It's getting better. I would like to give you an example. 2 days ago,
sure.
I was talking to someone who relayed to me that her nephew was dealing with a young Marine who had recently graduated from Paris Island and had been stationed in Somalia, saw some action, and went home. He was in the reserves and was going to be called up again. Well, the first incidents he had PTSD, but didn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Now he's being called up again, and there's no record of him ever having PTSD. The Marine Corps or any services want able-bodied person, both mentally and physically. Sure. That has changed. So if you come back and you're a young person and you let people know how you feel and you start seeing the therapist, that's a record of your of issues. And the next time you're called up, that can be used to keep you out of action. If you have PTSD, all you're going to do with a second war zone type of experience is you're going to exasperate your PTSD. You're going to get more worse. You're going to want to isolate. So this person talked to me. It was his best friend. I talked to him and told him what he needs to do. Contact the Veterans Administration. Contact somebody that works with them, a psychologist, psychiatrist. Just start talking to the people, especially the military, about how you feel. They won't call you up if they know that's part of your issue. Right. And then long term, if you're recording your issues, it's being documented. If that PTSD gets to a point where you can't work and function, or the depression, then you have a record of that. It was caused by a service injury.
Right.
And you can be rewarded for that, perhaps a wrong term, but get a monthly stipend for that kind of a thing. You faced, you were a United States military. You did what our government said you needed to do in another country, and if you're injured physically and mentally, then you deserve to be taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the thing is I think in civilian life, when you have, and we're going to talk about this too, because a lot of people think PTSD is strictly a military, it's a military thing, and it's not. But in civilian life, you know, when you're dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder and depression, if you have a job that isn't a particularly dangerous job, you have a desk job, or if you have something that doesn't pose a physical risk to you, you could probably get through it without really hurting anybody. But if you operate heavy machinery, if you work or you're running in an industrial setting, or if you drive for a living, these occupations can endanger yourself and others as much as if you are in a war zone.
Absolutely.
So, if you wouldn't mind, and I know there's other things we have to get to, the non-military PTSD. Did the symptoms differ from military PTSD? How would that be treated? How would that even be recognized?
The experience would be different, but PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is simply a single or multiple events that horrify you so much they imprint on your brain. And it just doesn't imprint on your brain what happened to you. It imprints the time of year, it imprints the smell, time of day. So then what happens is, untreated, you will come back and periodically feel those same symptoms, even though if you're in the military, it's not a war zone, or if you were abused or assaulted, that's no longer happening to you, but you feel those symptoms again. It completely closes you down. If you're driving, you'd have to get off to the side of the road. You'd have to wait until they pass. You'd be shaking. You'd be fearful. You'd have a belief that somebody's going to attack you. All of these things are real in the moment. And, excuse me, there are medications for it, but until you know you're going to go through it, you can't take the medications. And until you learn what some of the symptoms are that are going to come at you and recognize them, then you don't take the medication until after the fact. PTSD symptoms with working today, if you're a civilian, you can let your bosses know, and because even though you're in a job that's not military based, you're still, if you go through an experience like that and shut yourself down, people are going to notice something's happening to you. So the best thing you can do is two things. In the military, let the officials know. In civilian life, do the same thing. But you need treatment for it, and you also need to start recognizing when the symptoms are coming on, and you need medication to prevent them from being full-blown symptoms. Veterans, an example, would have a family and just isolate them in their rooms. They would always say, I'm not feeling well. I did the same thing with my PTSD symptoms. Or I'd save up all my sick days and simply tell my wife I'm not feeling that well, and then she would know, and I'd isolate myself in my room.
Sure,
why?
Yeah.
Because we grew up, especially the Vietnam era, believing there's shame involved in that, that you're not strong enough. I no longer believe that, but I'm just giving you examples of the type of things you're going through with PTSD.
Well, this is why it's really important to get the proper mental health care, because I don't think a YouTube video is gonna be able to give you the skills, because it is a skill set to be able to recognize these symptoms.
Absolutely.
And then have the ability not only to recognize them, but then proceed with whatever treatment was prescribed for you. And like I said, this isn't my wheelhouse. I'm not able to give anyone advice, which is why I send people your way or to other people in the community. But I do know that without in any mental illness, without the proper treatment, without the proper psychoanalysis, it's almost impossible for you to treat yourself for this. Is that correct?
It is impossible to treat yourself. And then the ultimate result is, once your family leaves you, if you're not sharing, at least share with them. Once your family leaves you, once you become isolated, once you can't work, the only option you can think of, and you keep thinking of it, is suicide. In the United States, 18.2% of the population thinks of killing themselves. Veterans, it's 27.5%.
Significantly more.
And I'd like to give you some numbers.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So for veterans, you can call 1-800-273-8255. If a lot of people who have PTSD or depression who don't go and see a therapist end up over-medicating themselves with other drugs. There's a recovery group that also deals with suicide, 352-771-2700, and Lifeline has a home texting 741-741 if you want to text them.
And I'll put all those numbers when I do the post-show promotion on Facebook and YouTube. I will put all those phone numbers out there.
On Facebook, I've been more than like every 2 days putting on the veterans and the young veterans right now in service who have been killing themselves, committing suicide as young as 20 and in their 30s and 40s. So it's getting very prevalent in America now, especially vets who have served. And the same thing happened to us, Vietnam vets, Korea. We're all doing the same thing. The pattern of behavior is keep your mouth shut and just get through it.
Yeah, and you know, I think I can't emphasize enough how important it is not to be ashamed of, you know, if you're dealing with mental issues, you know, mental illness. I mean, we were talking in the car on the way over here. You know, you break your leg, you go to a doctor, and the leg is sad, right? You have a cough, you go to the doctor, and you get cough medicine. But for some reason, reasons that we've discussed on previous shows, people are very reluctant to admit, even to their doctor, you know, in the confidence of their doctors, that they're struggling with some mental issues. And you know, as bad as a broken leg is, right, or cracked ribs, you know, that's a physical thing, and that'll heal. You know, ignoring your mental health, it will get progressively worse.
Absolutely, you'll isolate yourself to a point where you have no one. One of the most important things when you're thinking about suicide is sharing with somebody, letting somebody know how you feel. I did Samaritans and trained people on their phones for many years.
Yeah.
And strangers, thousands of people a year in Little Rhode Island would call because they had isolated themselves to a point that there was no one left. Well, they'd call us just before they were going to attempt suicide, and they'd say they were going to do it anyways, but truly what they wanted to do is hear from one more human being that cared about them.
Sure.
Here, there's also Boquete Veterans Outreach, and they're veteraninfo@gmail.com. So you can be talking to them. They have a good group of men here because here it's a little more difficult to find. You can find medication. Dr. Shannon tomorrow will talk about that on her radio show.
That's right. You're going to be on Talking with Your Doctor tomorrow,
yes,
right here on the same radio station?
Yes.
Saturday at 10 o'clock.
That's absolutely right. Finding people who are counselors here, there are a few is difficult. I no longer have my psychology license. I am licensed as a mental health person, reality therapist in the United States. I don't take fee-for-services here because I'm not licensed here. I have helped people, especially veterans, who want to talk and have somebody listen and give advice. I'm fine with that, but it is more difficult in this country, and I think that you have to turn to your friends and loved ones to just express to them how depressed you are. People will help you here. Expats, it's one of the most loveliest places on earth. Panamanians are the loveliest people on earth, in my opinion, and I've been everywhere. So please ask somebody to listen to you, to help you.
Now, and that's very true. You know, there's always someone here.
Yes.
There's a lot of us expats here. There's a lot of us here who have, you know, in the military, whether they're former military or like yourself, retired. There's people here who are going through mental, being treated for mental illnesses. There are people here who are dealing with PTSD that have sought help. So there's a lot of resources here in this area, in Boquete, in the district, particularly in Bajo and Alto, that are around, to help and for you to reach out to. I did want to ask you, I know that suicide is very misunderstood. There are still a lot of people who look at it as a cowardly way out. There is that disdain, that shame that carries over to your family, after you've taken your life. And I wanted to ask you, at what point, and I'm not saying that you should never take seriously someone who says, I'm just going to go kill myself. But is there a point to where you should really start, being concerned? Are there behavior patterns, or what can you tell us about when we should say, hey, this person I think is serious, they're not screwing around?
That's an excellent question. So, some of the warning signs, talking about wanting to die. You take a person that's got cancer and saying, I don't know how long I'm going to live, and that can mean to you, if you've heard it every day, this friend or family say this, you just assume that the pain is so much that maybe someday he or she's going to die. But a suicidal person will say that. What they're doing is they're looking for a reaction. They're looking for someone to care. So take something like that serious. I tell people to ask the questions. When you say that, it confuses me. Are you talking about taking your own life? Are you talking about killing yourself? People are uncomfortable doing that. One of the things in the last 40 years that has been studied and is absolutely true is anyone who is not thinking of killing themselves will not get the idea because you asked the question. The only people that will hesitate and talk to you are the ones that have actual thoughts in their mind and they're searching for someone to help you.
So just by asking them, you're not going to push them over
Never,
the edge or anything?
absolutely never. Talking about wanting to die, telling people they have a feeling of emptiness, hopelessness, having no reason to live. Pain, physical and mental, can give people thoughts of suicide.
Sure, absolutely.
Talking about being a burden on others. If you have an illness that's long-term and you're going to live forever with you, when somebody's talking to you about being a burden to them, be careful. It's not talking about they're thinking about a way to not be a burden.
Sure, yeah.
To them.
There's a genuine, hey, I don't want to put you out, let me investigate other avenues of care, as opposed to, I don't want to be a burden to you, I'm just going to end my life. That's two completely different things.
Thank you. Just ask them the question. Using more alcohol that you're used to, seeing a member of your family or loved one be more anxious and agitated, withdrawing from family and friends, that's an absolute. Somebody that's withdrawing from people that they love and care about, absolutely, you need to ask the question why. Somebody giving away mementos. I have a cross I've worn from the Marine Corps. If I was to give that away, I'd either have a permanent illness or I'd want somebody to remember me when I pass.
Right.
It could be a suicidal thought. It could simply be I wanted to go to my grandchildren.
Yeah, sure.
Change in sleep habits. Both sleeping too much is a sign of both depression. Both sleeping too little is a sign that there's a lot of things going on in your mind and it won't allow you to sleep. Showing rage. Talking about seeking revenge. Somebody that's always been a very mellow person and all of a sudden they're starting to talk about that, that's a change in behavior. All of these things are changes in behavior. If you see them, then ask the question why. That's all you have to do. A person that's looking for somebody to talk to may not open up right then, but they will open up eventually and they will remember that you asked the question.
Yeah, well, it's planting a seed. It's
exactly.
Now, what about things like tying up loose ends? And I ask this because, there have been a few people in my extended family who have taken their own lives, and it seemed that some of the last things they did was reconnecting with family members that they haven't spoken to in a long time, planning trips, spending a lot of time reminiscing, going over, making sure that, you know, if there was a perceived forgiveness required, that was given. I mean, would that be a significant change in behavior to watch out for?
That would absolutely be one. I mean, it could be the person is sick. Elderly people tend to want to do that, whether they're, as we get older. But absolutely one of the things you want to do if you're deciding to take your life is you look at everything in your life that somebody else would have the burden of doing, a will, making a will, many other things, giving away mementos. You want to do that all yourself. So the only burden a person has, even as far as paying for a cremation or a funeral, and you'll leave a note with all the details of absolutely what you want.
Right.
So you have to look at that with a keen eye and decide that, is this a healthy person? Is this a person that's never thought about that before, like Al's relatives? And all of a sudden they're doing that. Simply ask the question why.
Sure, because I'd imagine it's a different thing. You know, if someone that you know very well says, "Hey, guess what? I purchased a burial plot and a headstone, and I've." There's these companies that take care of your end of life affairs.
Absolutely.
Just for the sake of preparation. But if someone is explaining these things to you, and they're also giving stuff away, and they're also self-isolating, that's
absolutely.
I would imagine, if you have a friend that is mentally stable, and they just tell you, "Hey, I bought a couple of burial plots," that's a little different than.
Right.
Than these combined things.
Or if they're younger, a younger vet or a younger person that's starting thinking about end-of-life decisions, they deserve a question of why. I mean, it may be that they're not sharing that they have a terminal illness, and they need your help and compassion too. They need someone to talk to and think about it. Some terminal illnesses are so painful that the choice of not going through that and suicide, medication, I mean, people that have a terminal illness or people that are depressed that have gone to a doctor have plenty of medication to end their life.
Sure.
So you have to just ask the question if you care about something. There are 26 million vets in the United States and all over the world. There are 2 million from Vietnam. We're losing a third of them because of the Second World War, and they're older. Now us, the Vietnam era group, are the number one people. There's 6.8 million Gulf era veterans, 771,000 still World War II, and 1.6 million Korean. There's 9% of women and 91% of men. Every one of those people have had some kind of, just about all of them have had some kind of traumatic event, and that comes out in them in different ways. And they need a friend. If they're civilians now, they need a friend to ask the questions why. They certainly need a friend when they start talking about it to suggest to them to go to the veterans organizations and seek professional help, and also go with them. It's not just about telling them what to do. One of the mistakes people make when somebody finally says they're suicidal is they tell them to be strong. They have so much to live for. That, I'm sorry, guys, and that's bullshit. What you need to do is
suck it up, buttercup thing. No, there's no need for that.
That's the shaming. What you need to do is just listen. And if there's a pause, ask what they would like you to do for them. If they don't know, you can make a few suggestions and say, if you won't do it today, then maybe another day. You can say then, for a time being, I'm going to check on you every day. If you don't like that, that's just too bad, because I care about you.
Yeah. Now, I did want to ask you, in the past couple of decades, there has been a lot of attention paid to planning your the end of your life,
right,
but not from a mental illness point of view, like doctor-assisted suicides, or several countries now, if you are diagnosed with a terminal illness, particularly terminal illnesses that have a very painful ending, that you can arrange legally through the government and through the health department to make your end of life choice, to go out on your own terms. Now, is that considered a mental illness, or is that something that has any viability to it? I don't know what to make of that.
There's a health proxy. Most therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists, if they know a person's active in that, they'll suggest to them to do a health proxy. They'll also suggest to them to get their affairs in order, and also to try to tell one person how they're feeling and what they're doing. When you go in a hospital, whether it's a mental hospital or a hospital for an operation, they do a health proxy.
Well, now, what can you explain a little bit what a health proxy is?
Sure. A health proxy is basically for a person going in the hospital and having an operation. A health proxy is end-of-life causes. What do you want the doctor and hospital to do to prolong your life?
Right, if something goes sideways in
right.
the surgery. Okay. All right.
A mental health proxy is what do you want a hospital to do when you've taken your own life but it hasn't been completed. It's actually the same health proxy. It's just you tell them that one of the things you don't want is to prolong your life with machines.
Right.
To have them feed you. You might say, I'll let you try to resuscitate me, but that's all. Or you might simply say, I won't allow that either. I've seen people convert them to mental health proxies, but really the ordinary health proxies, and you can get them online, are end-of-life decisions.
Yeah, because there have been, particularly in the last maybe decade, there has been a lot of attention on this, I have terminal cancer, or I have, whatever, and I know what this looks like. My doctors have told me when I reach this point, I'm going to be in constant pain. When I reach this point, I'm going to have or like Alzheimer's. I'm not going to know who anybody is. I'll be in a semi-vegetative state. And there's a lot of people who are like, I don't want it, that's not a quality of life.
Right.
I don't choose, or I choose not to exist under those circumstances. Is that treated as a mental health issue, or is that treated as a viable choice, for how you want to go out? I know it's a touchy subject. I know, there's a lot of people who don't, but it has come up a lot recently.
It's a great subject. It's why Samaritans, when we did the hotline, we'd never send police, fire, or rescue unless you gave us permission, because an adult who's capable of making those decisions has a right to make them, sadly, but it's true. As far as your doctors, they look at your overall mental health and see if you're capable of making a determination about taking your own life. If you're capable of it, they're not going to share that with anyone. They're not going to share that with your relatives. If somebody comes in with them and has a discussion in front of them, that's a different thing. But no, a doctor, a psychiatrist, psychologist, or therapist is not going to share that information with anyone. We don't have the right, because if we look at our patient and know our patient's cognitively capable of making those decisions, then we leave it to that patient to decide when life is too unbearable, be it physically or mentally.
Yeah, I mean, we've all seen, we've all seen, either whether it be in the movies or TV or real life, with our own friends and relatives, visiting them in the hospital, and they're hooked up to a machine. They're on a ventilator. Their machines are breathing for them. There's no brain activity. If that person had the ability to in their past say, hey, I want to go to this point, but if it gets past this point, I don't want to be here anymore. And I could understand that. There's an understanding to that. Especially if you have debilitating terminal illnesses that are only going to, your life's not getting better. This stuff's, you're not coming out. You're not escaping this. Pancreatic cancer is very, very fast moving.
Right.
Et cetera, et cetera. So I could understand if. And this is where I have the question, Dan, is if it's a physical thing, okay? If just say, for example, I got diagnosed with a terminal illness, pancreatic cancer or something, to where the quality of my physical life, the pain is going to be so intense that I could make a choice. I don't want to endure that. That's the decision made on physical pain. What about someone who wants to end their life because they mentally can't deal with it anymore? Is that any different? Is that any more or less a viable reason?
It's not different at all. Every time you go in a hospital for whatever you have, they ask you if you have a proxy for life, what you want to do if something happens, if you want to end. They do that for two reasons. One of the reasons is because they want you to make that decision. So we're talking about physical health. And they also have an awareness of just how much it would cause your families. Machines can keep you alive forever, even though there's no brain activity. Well, a mental health professional will do the same thing. They're very aware with their patients. If they're serious about committing suicide, they're very aware that they need a proxy. They need someone in their family with that will to make a decision and end a life decision from. Because yes, they can get to you and give you oxygen, and then they can hook you up to the same machines that'll cost your family, make them financially destitute, and that person is no longer there. So mental health professionals treat mental health issues of end state, end of life, the same way we would treat if we were doctors with physical end of life.
Right.
We believe if you're capable of making that decision, and you deserve. One of the interesting things about being a Samaritan many years ago is Rhode Island still had it on the books, a law that if you attempted suicide but were unsuccessful, you could be charged with that. They never used that law, but one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. Most states are very cognizant. Most insurance companies now have a rider on it that if you get insurance, first of all, they check. If you want $10 million and you make $20,000 a year, you're not going to get that. But if you want insurance, if something happens to you, most of them have a rider that says that you will pay for this insurance for 2 years. But if after that time you commit suicide, they will pay you.
They'll pay out.
That shows you that even the industry that makes decisions on helping financially your families recognize that you have a right to decide if you don't want to live or not.
Well, it wasn't too long ago where it didn't matter how long you had your insurance policy. If you took your own life, it made it null and void.
Right. And go ahead.
And I'm glad you brought that up about physical health and mental health, because you've got people who they may have a very aggressive form of bone cancer, and I've been around people with bone cancer, and it is excruciating. You're basically on pain meds. You're on morphine. You're on a permanent morphine drip. But you also have mental disabilities like dementia and Alzheimer's. So it, on the one hand, I have this physical diagnosis, and I know that I'm going to be in a lot of pain. My mind is still intact, but my physical body is going to be deteriorated so much that I'm going to make this choice to where I'm going to call in or have someone assist me. But there's also a significant amount of people that have the mindset to where if I get Alzheimer's or dementia, I'm not there anymore, and I don't want to be left in a nursing home staring blankly out a window in perfect physical health, right? Your body may be in great shape. Your body may live to be 100 years old, but when you hit 60, 70, your mind starts to go. They don't want to continue. And what I was asking you is it seen as the same right for a human being to make a choice to end their life, not just for physical disability or physical pain, but not wanting to be in a vegetative state or have Alzheimer's to the point where you just can't function anymore?
It's absolutely the same. You have physical issues that cause you to have mental health issues.
Sure.
Depression can come from any kind of physical ailments, permanent. The courts, all the legal terms, everybody recognizes suicide as a right of the patient. You just need to do it. You need a proxy. You need to fill out the paperwork, and you need to do that here in Panama.
Sure.
You need to fill out the paperwork and have a proxy that says that you don't want to live the rest of your life when your brain has stopped working by machines. So you need a proxy. You need a person in your family. You can pick it to tell them what you want to do, give a copy of it, and then give a copy, if you have a lawyer, give a copy to a lawyer.
Sure.
So if you're also given your will to a lawyer, then he has the proxy too. So then if there's an argument between family members, the lawyer will submit that to the courts. It may take a little time, but eventually it'll be worked out in the favor of the patient who has said, I don't want any end-of-life mechanics to keep me alive.
Sure, and it is very different here in Panama. The folks over at the Boquete Health and Hospice have a booklet out called, I think it's How to Living and Dying, and I apologize if you're listening, especially Joni. The name of the book is something like Living and Dying in Boquete. I'm sure someone will text that to me here in a minute. But that has all the paperwork and all the forms and everything that you need to do to get a power of attorney, to give a power of attorney here. And again, I profusely apologize for forgetting the name of that book. I have a copy of it too, right? So I should know. But I'll put that in the link too, since it's the same thing. But yeah, you should have all your affairs in order, all your ducks in a row, especially if you're an expat.
And Joni, who will come out before COVID and do a group, she did a group of us, will give you all the information you need that is legal here. They've done a lot of research about it. And then your family, if you're in a stage where you know life is ending, then you need to make sure that your family doesn't have to go through 1,000 hoops to take care of you, whether it's cremation or what it is. And that's where these end-of-life documents come in. If you're in a foreign country, especially, because the laws could be different than in America. But you need to do that, and you need to get in touch with hospice and get in touch with Joni and anyone else who's doing it. They're a wonderful organization. I have a permanent disability with one leg. They have helped me with wheelchair, crutches, canes. They were going out and doing visits. They just are one, if not the best resource here in Boquete.
Yeah, and you can find them on Facebook, Boquete Health and Hospice. And again, if someone wants to send me the correct name of that booklet, and I get some having a brain fart. You know, you hit 50 and that check engine light comes on, and it just never goes off, does it?
Wait until you're 70.
Okay, and you know, I know we've kind of beat this subject into the ground here, but it's really a shame that suicide has got, and mental health in general has got such a stigma to it, because there are a lot of people suffering out there, and there are a lot of people who can benefit, you know, from therapy. That they just, you know, like you said earlier, you know, there's a whole be strong, suck it up, you know, power through it, and that's just kind of an archaic way to look at mental health. You don't power through a broken leg. Right. You have it fixed. Right. You know, you don't power through cancer. Well, I guess you do in a way, but you get what I'm saying. Yeah. You know, there's treatment available for whether it's physical or mental illness. There shouldn't be any shame or any stigma in seeking help, you know, and trying to get better, trying to, you know, to grow, to, you know, help yourself. It's just a shame that we're still dealing with that. Right.
Depression, anxiety, PTSD, you can't be tough and get rid of it. It's going to stay with you. If you determine to do it on your own, it'll either get worse or it'll force you to make decisions, and to see somebody, healthcare, Dr. Lopez and Dr. Shannon, they both do wonderful when it comes to psychotropic medications to treat depression, sleep disorders, but you need help. If you're becoming depressed over COVID, you have a window of time before that depression becomes permanent. It'll become permanent even if everything changes and we go back to the way it was. Right. The synapses, your brain chemistry simply changes when your brain sees depression. It reacts in a certain way. If you go at a 6 months time and don't get some kind of treatment for it, then it will be permanent. My suggestion to you is, if you can't find a therapist here, at least talk to a doctor here about getting medication that will leave it until you can go back to doing the things you used to do. Yeah. Same thing with PTSD and same thing with anxiety. If you're taking medication for PTSD or anxiety or depression, that gives you time to relegate your brain back to homeostasis, which was normal, and then that gives you time to think about what's the next step, to heal yourself, to go to counseling. But if you're not doing any of those things, if you're trying to toughen it out, you're doing damage to your brain, and eventually you'll do damage to your body, because a depressed person, there's all kinds of studies out there how it will give you some physical injuries.
Yeah, well, there's you harm yourself,
right?
Whether it's beating your head against the wall, which is actually a thing,
right?
Cutting yourself,
right? Or heart attacks, or all of those.
There's the results of depression that will give you medical problems that are involuntary,
right?
And then there's the voluntary ones like suicide, cutting yourself, self-harm, and it's really nothing to ignore. And some of the medication here is relatively inexpensive.
Oh, absolutely.
$15-$20 a month.
Right.
You can go on these medications,
right.
And they're very well studied, and they've been excellent. These medications have been around for a couple generations already. They're safe, and as long as you follow your doctor's advice and instructions,
right.
You can start on a road to helping yourself. Interesting thing you said about COVID, that you have a window. Would it be safe to say that if you are get really anxious about COVID, or if it does have that kind of an impact on your mental health, that even if, like you said, things go back to normal, whatever that means, right? 2 years down the road, there's not a pandemic, but maybe there's an epidemic somewhere, that would be a trigger. So you've been fine for a year or two, and now all of a sudden you use Ebola or whatever is in. Would an epidemic or another medical emergency, would that trigger you into that whatever mental health problem you had exacerbating, coming back?
That's a really interesting question. So I'm with a number of psychologists and psychiatrists working through WhatsApp to start studying the new manual on all kinds of mental health issues. Is now the DSM-5. We're trying to prepare for the DSM-6. So when we think of PTSD, we think of one or multiple traumatic events that happen in your life that reoccur at other times in your life when you don't have to worry that you're in a war or somebody's assaulted you. Now, the question now becomes, is COVID a PTSD type of event that gives you long-term effects that don't go away simply because you can now go out to as many restaurants as you want, you can now be in as large a crowd as you want, you now don't have to wear a mask? And the simple answer is we believe so. We believe that without studies, and some studies take at least 10 years, without a study to prove it, we believe that most patients that we're dealing with are more depressed and more anxious now that COVID's around. Their questions are, what will happen when COVID goes? Center for Disease Control says it's not just COVID, there are other types of infectious diseases coming along. So they're kind of telling people to be prepared for other things. So does that, just saying that, become a PTSD event? It's a good question. I'm absolutely happy that Al asked it. And I think, yes, I think once you start seeing normalcy, then you have to train your brain to go back to feeling like it's normal. You have to train your brain to say you did all the things to keep you alive. Now you deserve happiness, and continue to find that happiness, because that will decrease the stimulation in your brain that says that that living is an unhappy situation and I'll always feel this way. No, you don't have to always feel this way. You can absolutely go back to the person you were. You have to go back to the things you love to do, and you have to push away those thoughts that it's only temporary and we're going to have another disease coming along.
Yeah,
Great question, though. And I think in long term, yes. I think long term, especially the children, will have PTSD formation in their brain, and we'll have to worry about it and deal with it at another time.
Yeah, I mean, 'cause it just makes sense to me that, you know, if your default, right, your mental default is, you know, everything's great, my life is wonderful, we're going through this pandemic now, it's a pain in the neck, you know, it makes me sad because I can't see my friends, but, you know, this too shall pass, as opposed to that being flipped around is to where now this is normal. The pandemic is normal. Not being able to see your friends, not going out, not being socially interactive with anybody. And when it's normal, that's not normal. That's the part of life that is gonna, it's, you know, waiting for that other shoe to drop, as it were. What's the next pandemic? When is COVID-21 coming, or COVID-23? There was even a science fiction movie that day, and I was flipping through Netflix. You know, we like those cheesy B movies, right? You know, creature features and all that. And we, you know, we had been through all the pandemic movies. You know, Outbreak, Flu. We were looking for another one, and we saw this movie about the pandemic, you know, decimating the earth, or you know, killing 95% of the population. And the first 5 minutes of the movie, what do you call it? The disease that killed everybody was COVID-23. Right. So they're already making movies about the next, you know. And I know it's just science fiction, but you know, you get far enough ahead in the future. I guess science looks like magic, right? But anyway, yeah. So they're already that mindset that when's the next one coming? What, you know? How long is it going to be good before it goes bad again? Right.
And it's really interesting in all those movies, and I watch them too, has an end result that people survive and go back to doing the things they do, even if 95% of the population has left us. The other thing interesting, and they did a lot of scientific research, because if you look at today how they approach COVID with isolation, with hospitalization, a lot of those movies, even made in the 1950s, are very similar to what they would do today to save lives. They would be looking for a serum. They'd be looking for something that they could inoculate people with. Polio was that type of thing. Flu was that type of thing. They've always come up with it. The difference this time, guys, is we weren't prepared as a country and a world. We will be prepared next time. They will be looking carefully at that, and they will be preparing to inoculate people for that. I think we have more hope. We certainly had more hope, if you're as old as me, during polio and during flu pandemics, and now we will have hope in the future. Just go back to the person you are, push away the thoughts about it's a gray world, even though I've gotten my shots and COVID's pretty well over it. It's not a gray world, especially here. You see the sun here all the time. You see sunbeams and you see rainbows. And once we're through with it, those rainbows have not stopped.
They'll still
and
be here.
Your good thoughts should stay with you.
Well, you know, I think, you know, we've got a few minutes here, but, you know, it's funny, though, comparatively, a lot of time has gone by between the Spanish flu in 1917, 1918, and COVID. Now there have been epidemics, throughout the last 100 years, but as far as worldwide pandemics go, it's been 100 years, been a century, and that's a lot of time. That's 5 generations,
right?
Okay, if you look at 20 years being a generation, which is I think average,
right?
When you look at when you go through archives and you look at the publications and the posters and the instructions and the things that were disseminated to the public in 1917, 1918, not a lot has changed.
No.
It was always, you could see them. Everyone thinks that the phrase social distancing is new.
Mm-hmm.
They used those exact words 100 years ago.
Right.
Masks. They were anti-maskers 100 years ago.
Right.
Limiting your the amount of people that you're on. So, excuse me. 100 years has gone by, and the medical community is saying, "Hey, this stuff still works. It hasn't changed."
Right.
Now, how they come up with their vaccines, the science that's involved, obviously, we've made incredible strides in the technology and distribution and logistics, but when you come down to the safest thing for us to do as human beings, not a lot has changed in 100 years. Wash your hands, wear a mask, observe social distancing. And if you're watching this video, we're 10 feet apart, we're outside. And if you're watching this video, you can see the wind. But anyway.
Except for one thing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. What is different?
Okay. In 1918, everybody wore a mask because they were socially conscious that they wanted to protect themselves, their family, and others. The difference is the feeling of righteousness a person can have by not listening to science, they listen to it then, and not taking the steps that if you don't want to protect yourself, at least protect others.
Right.
That's the true difference today. And the lack of understanding that scientists are only paid to find things to help you, and they're not paid to give you bullshit and say that something is there that isn't.
Yeah.
No one is making...
The whole purpose of science,
yes,
the scientific method, is to prove themselves wrong.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
Right.
Here we have this,
Right.
let's see if we can prove it wrong. And
Right.
and I think a lot of
Right.
people don't understand how
Right.
science works.
Right.
They don't understand the scientific method. They don't understand, the progression from having an idea to a hypothesis to testing to theory to law.
Right.
And it's it can get complicated, but 100 years ago you didn't have the internet, you didn't have Facebook, you didn't have social media, and misinformation wasn't so easily given out. It wasn't so easily available. Yeah.
Here's the last thing I'd like to leave with you.
Sure.
with.
Yeah, we got a couple minutes.
I worked in 2 hospitals as a therapist and psychologist. Social workers know me in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut for some of my work. So one of them called me and asked that in one hospital, asked if they could use WhatsApp. It wouldn't cost anybody anything. And their co-workers and doctors and nurses and even people that clean the rooms could call me when they're feeling especially depressed. I said yes to that, never knowing time zones and that people in different parts of our country would be calling at very odd hours.
3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And you got to answer it,
right. And that has gone now to 5 hospitals. Let me tell you something. If you don't believe that you should do what you're supposed to do is simply distance, wearing masks, and washing your hands, then talk to a nurse. You can
Sure.
go online and talk to a nurse and let them tell you what they go through. If you want to talk about PTSD in the future, you have it here with nurses, doctors, people who clean the rooms, dietitians. All healthcare workers now have PTSD. It's severe. Some of them have killed themselves, and simply because their patients won't wear masks, distance themselves, and wash their damn hands.
Yeah, and it's really, in the grand scheme of things, it's really not a lot to ask.
Yeah.
Besides, look, if you're not washing your hands regularly anyway,
Yeah.
someone should probably give you a lesson on personal hygiene.
That's
And
right.
I'm not trying to insult anybody,
No,
but if
no.
you knew what we touched every
Yeah.
day,
That's right.
So washing your hands should be a no-brainer, right?
Absolutely.
Wearing a mask really is not that. It's not that much to to ask. I mean, you look at a lot of the healthcare professionals, and they would double and triple masks,
Yes.
8, 10, 12 hours a day.
Yes.
So if someone's asking you to throw a surgical mask on, throw a piece of cloth over your face. It's not a lot to ask, and you're not only helping yourself, but you're helping everyone around you. Dan, we're out of time.
Absolutely.
I want to thank USMC retired First Sergeant Dan Gallagher, retired psychologist, for being with me today. We had a really good show, Dan. I'm going to have you back real soon.
Thank you.
You've been listening to BoqueteNOW Talk Radio on Radio Cherokee 103.3 FM, sponsored by Big Daddy's Grill, Boulder 54 in the Tap Out Sports Zone. I wish you all have a wonderful, outstanding day. Pasen buen día, mi amigos, hermanos, and we are out.